Hey guys, welcome to the 101 in 10, where you get to see your favorite indie artists from around the world 101 in 10 minutes. I'm your host, Ayasha Roberson, and I'm back on the indie scene with new artists. So this artist has this really nice eclectic sound. He's just very creative when it comes to his songwriting, his lyrics. It's very relatable, it's organic, it's authentic, and I wanted to definitely just introduce you guys to him. And with no other further ado, help me please welcome Mr. Saun Santipreecha to the show. Thank you so much. Yay! For
Thank
being on the
you.
show with us. So can you
Thank you for
tell
having
us
me.
a little bit about your musical influences and how did you become the artist that you are today?
Gosh. Well, I started off in oddly enough in ballet when I was 6 as a dancer. So I don't do that anymore, but that's kind of how I started. And so Tchaikovsky was a big part of
Mhm.
my musical childhood. And then I got into opera, and I did classical piano for many years. So I kind of grew up in that world, but of course also in film music and film. And I do a lot of film now. So I would, so anyway, so that's my past. But my influence are from all sorts. I love different kinds of artists. I'm very interested in almost all the art forms, and that's usually where I draw my own inspiration. I think it's important for me to try to not stay too solidly or too firmly in one box, or to draw inspirations from only one aspect of things. So I'm very interested in visual art, in architecture, in psychology. I like exploring, and that sort of informs what I'm going to explore.
That's beautiful because as I'm listening to your story of how you got started, I would have never thought that you were into classical music or ballet as how that kind of got you started to where you are today. And I
Mm,
think because you have this so spread of different influences and not being in the box, you're able to really create your own style and stay in your and make your own lane. I believe a lot of newer artists, especially independent artists, have a hard time doing that because it's all
mm,
about followers, it's all about likes, it's all about kind of like almost mimicking other people versus really figuring out who they are as a person. And I think that because you were able to figure out who you are as a person, it was easier for you to create your music as your
mm,
own style.
mm.
That's basically from what I heard. So I'm very blown away.
Thank you. Yeah, it's an ongoing process. I think I think stories really were the beginning for me. I think more so than ballet. I mean, visual art was the beginning, artistically also for me. And I loved reading. I still love reading. So I love storytelling, and I love getting into characters. But yes, it took a while for me to kind of back out of that, even to find, who am I, right? Like what, and being, I grew up very multicultural. I'm from Thailand originally, but English is my first language, and I do speak Thai, but so I'm kind of dual language, but also culturally. And
Right.
so that's obviously much more common these days too. And I think that's uh, an interesting place to be, because you're trying to figure out, and that's been a big part of my creative process, is trying to figure out, where do I stand, in relation to who, and into which society, and that those
Correct.
sorts of things.
And you do it so flawlessly with your music. All the music that you have written, just telling you guys, he has done music for motion pictures and uh, music for films. It just goes on and on and on and on. And because you were able to really figure out who you were as a person and then also as this artist as well, it flows so organically, it flows so
Mm,
naturally. And that's the thing, that the essence that you are able to get. And I want newer artists and even artists that's been around for a while that haven't been able to get it, I want them to be able to at least be able to hear it from you, because you're just you're just this powerhouse, and it's beautiful to see how you just let it flow, just let that energy just flow, and I just love it. Now, let's talk a little bit about your success story. So I just mentioned some of your uh, music that you have written for motion pictures and films. Can you tell a little bit about the success stories and also the challenges as being an artist?
Well, a solo artist or artist in film?
It can be, you know what? Whatever comes, whatever floats your boat. I mean, you could do either or.
Well, I've recently kind of come to because I've asked myself this question a lot too. What is the relationship between these two aspects of what I do? And I've come to feel like the main difference for me is that with film or other media like theater or dance, a lot of that for me, the starting points are quite different. The starting points for solo work is internal. In the sense that which is partly what is so challenging about that. You know, it's figuring out who am I and what do I want to say and how can I say that, and who am I communicating with is very important as well, right? Because and that's been part of my creative journey is realizing, well, sure, I can enjoy this kind of music, but what audience is that, you know?
Right.
And it's not about, I mean, of course the followers and those are practical aspects of it these days too, but also in the sense of art is about dialogue, right? And so you know, especially with music and especially where music is now, because when music comes from the practice of performing as a group, right? As a communal thing of musicians, but also the audience. But now music has shifted into a much more private domain oftentimes. And I myself do that. I like to listen on my own earbuds and things like this. So it shifts your interaction with your audience. There isn't the real-time feedback or conversation or dialogue in the way a jazz concert or an orchestral concert might have been. So anyway, but the impetus comes from within. Whereas I think with other forms of work like film and things, it comes more from a reaction. So I'm reacting to the story. And I often get ideas reading a script or seeing images. I'll have sensorial things, like depending on how the image looks, I'll start to hear sounds or colors musically that I might be interested in playing. And a lot of it is based on storytelling, which actually is part of the history of like, you know, film music came from opera, right? Because in terms of its function. And so anyway, but it's coming from a reaction to a story or a set of characters. Whereas I think with solo work, like for example, my latest album, Dandelye, that had to come from within. Although I slightly cheated because Dandelye, my album, was sort of a punctuation mark at the end of an almost 5-year process of me trying to write a book.
Wow.
Called Dandelye, which went through many drafts in many forms, and is still basically unfinished. But I was able to I spent a long time trying to figure myself those internal questions we discussed through the writing of the book. So the exploration of it in the form of an album was sort of an ending point to a degree.
Wow.
But it's an internal thing. So to me, that's the significant difference between those two.
It's awesome. And that actually will help other artists who are interested in getting their music in film and motion pictures to understand the two very differences between the two and how you have to really pull from a different type of energy to create one versus the other.
Yes, but of course they're related in the sense that, which is partly why, because when I started doing music more, well, compositionally, more professionally, it was more so in film. And then I sort of pulled myself away from that to a degree to try to form my own points of views on things. So I actually think artists who have spent their time and their life developing their own solo music and developing their own points of view on the world and things like that does potentially place them in a really good spot in terms of wanting to go into film, because then they can come to it with their point of view. So they're still reacting, but they have a core of what are they reacting from, you know?
That's beautiful. And it's beautiful and it's relatable as well. Because usually the core that you're reacting from has some relatability back to who you're trying to inspire and empower and motivate it through that music.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm always learning something new.
Sure.
Now let's talk a little bit about your album Down the Line. You already said that it was a book originally, but then it became your album. What was some of the, I mean, writing a book is it could be very tedious, very expensive. It's a process of just kind of like putting things together of where you want to start and where you want to go versus the album. So how did you come up with the concept or to turn this into this album, Dandelion?
Well, I think it really came out of, you know, I've been thinking about this book, which was a story, and then it became a book of poems and all this for very many years. And I kind of not formulated, but worked out through the process, you know, ideas about who I am and where I stand. So the album really came from just wanting to explore that in a musical sonic realm, in particular because the relationship it shares for me, particularly in what I was trying to do with this album, is it's a private album, meaning that it's not music that's meant to be performed. It can't really be performed. The instrument and the medium of it is the recording. And it was, you know, and I really was exploring bringing a lot of field recordings into it, because I still am very interested in this question of inner outer. I'm very interested in the relationship between our experiences, how we experience. Obviously, we're all physically trapped within ourselves, so we're all experiencing through, but not just physically us, but also through the lenses of all sorts of things, like our society, our culture, our social status, and things like this. And they filter all this stuff in. So I'm very interested in the contrast or the exploration of the two. I think the difference with something like what with Dandelye, and that's a play throughout the album of things like taking recordings of rain. For example, one of the pieces called Rain Dance was me literally with my recorder. I was actually moving within that space.
I love it.
And you know, it was raining really hard. I opened up all the windows, and I decided to try something new, where rather than just placing the microphone in a still position and just capturing it, I thought, well, what if I moved within the space with the mic around? So I basically was dancing within the space. And so the shift of sound, so it's playing with this question of perspective, right? And that kind of became the basis of that track. But also it changed how I viewed sound recording, because most sound recording or field recordings do come from a more documentary aspect, which is great, and I think that's very important for certain explorations. But from where I was coming from, of internal experience of external factors and external situations, I was interested in trying to capture a personal perspective of that. I forgot your question. I'm so sorry.
No. I think you captured the perception very well, because I listened to your album over the weekend, this past weekend, and I was like dancing to the rain, and I was like very like in this visual type of state when it came to the Molecule Station. And I mean, your album, this whole album is incredible. And it was just like, me personally, music is energy. So you are able to tap into that energy of that music where it just connects you and you're just flowing into a different realm and you're experiencing what you're experiencing through your music. So I'm telling you guys, his album is thebomb.com. I really love it. And I was telling a couple of my colleagues about the album. So you guys have to check out Dandelion, his album. Make sure you go to, oh yeah, tell everyone about your website. I almost forgot.
Oh, well, it's santipreecha.com. And I'm sure, I'm sure you can have a
we'll
link
have
or
it.
something. But yeah, that's my website.
Yes, Santipreecha.com. And then guys, you make sure you go to his website, check out all his music, and also make sure you follow him on social media as well, so you can actually find out the latest about what projects he's working on, upcoming appearances as well, and so forth. But so thank you so much for this interview. I really enjoyed it. I learned so much about your music.
Likewise.
And blessings to you as well. And thank you guys for tuning into the 101 in 10, where you get to see your favorite artists from around the world 101 in 10 minutes. I'm your girl, Ayasha Roberson. I look forward to seeing you back next week. Same channel. Take care and continue to be safe, guys. Bye.
Thank you.